Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Jari Saloma. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Valo AI, working in the Salesforce ecosystem for many years. And this is part of our podcast series. And I'm here with Hermanni. Welcome and great to meet you. Thank you for coming. It's lovely to have you.
It's always a pleasure.
Excellent. So, hey, let's do a quick introductions. I think the audience for sure would like to learn who is Hermanni, what you're doing, and maybe a quick story. How did you end up in the Salesforce ecosystem?
Yeah, so my full name, Hermanni Toivo, is who I am. And what do I do is I help organizations align their Salesforce technology stack to better serve their strategy and their strategic goals. And I'm very focused on Salesforce from that front. Mm-hmm. How I got started in Salesforce was actually, it's a long story, but it happened because of the military or civil service we have to do here in Finland.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I actually did the civil service, and it was a staff meeting in October 2016 where the CEO of the organization asked, we have so much information flowing through our organization. So many customers we're serving, so many different other parties we're interacting with. How can we keep all this information, keep check of, what we have communicated to everyone? We need a CRM. Are there any volunteers? I raise my hand. Nobody else raises their hand. And then I start assessing, what's the best CRM to take for us and how we should be going forward, what are the requirements we need to implement in the first place. And then I find out that Salesforce is actually free for us because we had less than 10 users at that point. And I thought, well, Salesforce looks like it's going to scale nicely. So already at that point, I was sort of inadvertently doing this kind of, how does this align with our strategic goals? I wasn't thinking of it in that way, but that was what I was doing without realizing it.
Right.
And then a few years on, I became a consultant at Deloitte, actually quit my studies for that sort of, or put them on pause, because I found what I was doing with Salesforce and with the technology to be much more interesting and learning much more doing that than in the school.
That's very cool. I bet you didn't regret raising your hand for volunteering on the CRM project, getting a job at Deloitte at that point.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Haven't regretted it very much since. No.
Yeah.
But I have to say that it was at the height of when Salesforce was just becoming a big thing, at least here in Finland. So there was a lot of luck involved as well.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. I think luck and skill often go hand in hand and are all about timing, being in the right place at the right time. Mm-hmm. I'm curious. So what kind of clients have you been focused on? Any particular type of clients, or who are some of the, I don't know if you're allowed to say, but some brands or customers or maybe some industries that you have worked with? And
Yeah. So the clients that I work with nowadays are mostly larger clients who are undergoing either larger transformations or have challenges with their ongoing technologies and aligning them to what it is that they're doing in their business and aligning it with the way that they want to do business. Mm-hmm. So the way I would normally engage the clients is I would start with a workshop where we determine, all right, what is it that you actually want to do in terms of your business, to find out what kind of things do you need from the technology, and in what direction that should be developed. Because very often the issue is that in terms of maturity of organizations these days, when I started in the Salesforce ecosystem, organizations didn't have really mature IT delivery organizations necessarily compared to nowadays. Now they do. Because a sort of change that I've noticed is that IT organizations are measured on the speed at which they produce new items and, I guess, put tickets through whatever ticketing system they're using.
That's right.
And what ends up happening there is if you get what you measure. You have a ticket, you have to put it through the system, so you put it through as quick as possible. When you do that 100 times over, without thinking in the big picture of like, how are we going to develop all of these things that we need to develop, each ticket becomes incrementally harder because you already have some sort of existing customization, existing configuration you've done, and you have to fit all those new features in with that. So you have to have some sort of a plan of like what it is that we really need to, what are the key processes we as an organization need to serve? Where are those processes being done? Using what systems, etc. And what I would see is this sort of change in the last years is the problem hasn't become, can we deliver these projects? But once we've delivered them and once we've had this maintenance ongoing, how do we make sure that all of these systems still align with the way we want to do business?
That is very interesting. And one of the topics came in an earlier conversation in this same podcast series about documentation. So you as a consultant, you arrive at a customer, you're working with them, and there's no documentation. There's a lack of documentation. And now you mentioned about the workshop model. Are you doing the documentation? Are you documenting what's being discussed? And there's also kind of like maybe when you talk about the future, you need to a little bit understand about the past, what you have, maybe some existing processes and configurations. So any thoughts around there that like, what maybe Salesforce admins, architects listening to this show could do in terms of better prepare for the future as business requirements change? You might have a new territory, a new role, and new products are getting introduced, and there's this constant flow of work and configuration. And how important do you think documentation or knowing what exists is, in order to support the building of the new?
Yeah. So when it comes to documentation, understanding how the system currently works is certainly a big part of that, because how it currently works plays a big role into if we want it to work a bit differently, what's the best way of changing it.
Right.
The one side is you got to understand where it is that we want to be in terms of technology stack, processes, how we do our business. On the other side is how we do our business currently. And you have to understand that also to be able to come up with a solid plan of how you get from the current state to that state in the future. And also I've seen a lot of plans for like multi-year transformations. If we right now today plan like a 10-year transformation program or even a 5-year transformation program, what we envision the requirements to be 5 years from now and how things are going to work, usually they don't stand the test of time.
Right.
And they're implemented in a somewhat different way, or they change a bit. And therefore it kind of makes sense to plan for the plan changing rather than hard coding.
That's good advice. Yeah.
But when it comes to like the documentation, there's sort of different purposes of documentation, is in my experience at least. Because when I read through old documentation, it's clear how the documentation has been written from a certain perspective to serve a certain purpose. So for example, in the initial implementation of a system, the documentation, whoever wrote it, was trying to write the documentation in such a way as some developer could go in and develop according to it. It's not necessarily meant for the purpose of somebody can look at the documentation, search through the documentation, and find out how the system works altogether. Because that's not the way the documentation was written. If it was written sort of per ticket basis, per development item basis, then you have scattered documentation all over the place that you can't really comprehend and see the big picture of how the stuff ties together, just because the way that the development was done was not done altogether. Not saying you should, do the development altogether always, definitely not. But to keep in mind, in sort of like when you are writing documentation and thinking about how to write documentation, you should really think about, all right, what's the purpose of this documentation? Is this documentation for now so that some developer can develop the item? Is this documentation so that everybody has agreement on what are the requirements? Is this documentation going to be read by somebody in the future, or is it just next month for us to get through this issue?
That's right. And also, does that then stand the test of time in a changing environment? You're creating documentation that it's like, obsolete in the next release. Salesforce is putting out new features and new capabilities, and the organization responds. And that makes a lot of sense. Great practical advice. Thanks, Hermanni. Curious on maybe diving into the deep end of Salesforce technology and some of the configuration items. And of course, now Salesforce been around for a long time. I myself joined the ecosystem around 2012, 2013, joining Salesforce as a product manager to help the company, I think, up-level the security stack with Shield, some monitoring technologies, transaction security, security health check, and a number of other technologies, trying to help admins and customers and architects to better understand the configuration, give them more tools to keep the Salesforce data secure. And I think often I remember talking about this shared security model, that it was our job as Salesforce to produce the technologies, and then it's you're responsible as a customer, as a consultant, to configure it correctly. And sometimes things didn't go according to the plan, and I always kind of a little bit struggled with the fact that people in the Salesforce ecosystem are not security experts. So my challenge as a product manager in Salesforce is like, how can I create products that are easy to use, easy to understand, with a little bit of a different mindset? As we in the business side want to build workflows and functionality, but then on the security side, there's somebody who's trying to misuse it or break it, and which sometimes is difficult. So I'm curious on your thoughts, being in the ecosystem for so long. How have you seen the trust or security and the challenge of like constantly learning new skills, maybe sometimes configuring, when if you talk about access control, for instance, profile permissions set, sharing rules. There's a lot to configure, and sometimes you don't have all the information or tools to know, am I making the right decision? So how have you seen this evolution over the years in Salesforce when it comes to trust and security, in your view?
The way I see it is, it's often this kind of thing that it's overlooked and treated as like any other requirement. Doesn't require any excess planning. It's sort of, if we need to create a new field and set field level security for that, we just do it as part of that development item or ticket that is being that is asking for that new field. There's no sort of more comprehensive planning as to who should have access to what. In my experience, when it comes to like internal users, when it comes to external users, I think the Salesforce, the users of Salesforce, or the organizations that use Salesforce, they're a bit more mature in that space, because
using like Experience Cloud,
using Experience Cloud, because there, I guess, you have a lot of external users. So if somebody has access to something that they shouldn't have, that's sort of automatically a data breach.
Right, catastrophic.
Whereas if it's an internal user, it's not really a data breach, because the data hasn't left the organization unless somebody has gained access, some external actor has gained access to one of the internal users. So, so the security is more thought out when it comes to external users than internal users.
That's a good thought. So maybe companies that, like, when we think about like addresses, or maybe some PII that you still have for internal users, maybe the address of the CEO, or, some private information of a customer that is stored in a field, maybe need to know bases, or like, data sharing between regions, that like, what data can I see, especially in like, areas of financial services. I think there's a lot of wealth management, CRM customers, there might be some sensitive information there. I think your point is that maybe organizations are less concerned about that. They trust their employees to do the right thing. Whereas I think then there's, of course, the human factor of like curiosity and people browsing information. If they can, they might do it.
That's absolutely true. But I think the biggest factor is a question of the efficiency of the organization. Because if we start making it hard to do things in the system for certain users, and at the moment when they need to do that something in the system, they need to escalate and talk to some other person who has the access to do that, to read that record, to view that field, to perform that edit, to delete that record. And it gets into its inefficiency in that regard. So it's a question of efficiency, I would see, rather, of like, let's just give everybody...
Giving speed to the organization to, like, you have specific jobs, outcomes, like, let's, and which then results into maybe organizations internally having more broader access than they might actually need for their job.
Yeah, exactly. But there are situations where these things do get considered, like if some user is not allowed to give a discount greater than this, where you could consider it really as a security requirement, but it's more of like a business process requirement. It's not. It's a question of you're not entitled to give a lower discount because of that's what our sales policy is, and it's really a business requirement. So if it's a business requirement, then it gets developed into the system. But if it's a security requirement, meaning that you really don't need to have access to that data on a day-to-day basis, then you still get access to it just because it makes our security management of our security model simpler. It just adds a lot of complexity to the development too if we start restricting users doing all. So I completely understand the angle from where this is coming. At the same time, there have been recently, especially, a lot of data breaches reported with regards to Salesforce, and security does come in layers. When I took the Salesforce CTA review board, one of the things they do assess in the review board is the security mechanism. So, for example, things like on certain types of records, not record types, but types of records, users should not be able to see the address. But they should be able to see it on other records. How do you do that? Using the standard sharing mechanisms, you really, there isn't a good way of doing it.
Right.
You have to build another object and have a relationship to it, and then use some sort of UI tricks to surface that information.
Create kind of conditional fields.
Yeah, well, conditional fields or like pop a quick action onto the layout that allows you to view the address, or then you do customization via an LWC.
Right.
Things like that, where you have to design around the security requirements. But because organizations usually have this kind of, when it comes to their internal users, that everybody can see everything. And if they shouldn't be able to see something, you just turn off the whole object for them.
Right.
Then when it gets to international organizations, of course, then there are data residency questions, or not data residency questions, but for example, why would somebody who is from a business unit from another country need to have access to data in another country, at all?
Yeah.
Then you just do the sharing mechanisms there. That's a rather simple requirement still compared to who should have access to this field.
That's right. Yeah. First, I must say congratulations on the CTA. By the way, that's a lot of work to go through. So, a lot of knowledge acquired, a lot of practical things. So congratulations. I'm curious on actually staying on the access topic. Cheryl Feldman and the Salesforce product team talked about, and then I think they announced for the Spring 26 release, the retirement of the profile-based permissions, which then they retracted and said that hey, we are not pushing forward with this, but it's still something valuable. It's still something you should consider, and put out a nice FAQ for organizations. So I bumped into a lot of customers who say that should we do it? It's a lot of work, and does everyone in my organization need report access? I have a specific profile. I don't want to have like build, hundreds and hundreds of profiles. Any advice or thoughts on you when we think about like profile permissions, maybe those profile layouts which will remain and are not planned to go away, but then when we think about like granular access or especially then auditing or maybe backtracking if something bad has happened, we need to know like how we could actually create a more secure environment. So any thoughts from you around profile permissions or permission sets?
So here the permission sets are, I would see like for the last 5 years, to be honest, I think permission sets and permission set groups have been the way to go. Yeah. Although I don't know if when exactly permission set groups were released, but I think they've been around for around 5 years.
Right.
And for permission management, yes, that's a lot easier to do because it allows you a lot better control over who gets access to what without having to have every single permutation as a separate profile. And now Salesforce has the feature, I forgot what it's called, where you can assign a user certain permission set groups and permission sets automatically based on certain attributes, which is also eases that even more so.
Right.
The profiles are very good when it comes to like customizing the user experience, things like that. That's honestly what they still need to be retained for. They can't be completely gotten rid of,
right?
Because of that. But the security part, I would say it's better to move towards that direction. Now, if we think about how you do that, I find that rarely is there a business case for just technical refactoring of a system. So you have to do it at the opportune moment when you're doing some sort of big enough change as to warrant to refactor your permission model to be based on the permission sets and the permission set groups. Because the profiles, if you just start incrementally changing permissions from permission sets to permission set groups, assigning those to users, that might work, but in the interim, that might add even more complexity because now you're sort of running two parallel ways of assigning the permissions. You don't know which one is which.
Yeah.
And then some user might go in and edit the permissions on the profile and somebody else edit the permissions on the permission set. So there could be two sources for the same permission for the same user. And then you think that you get rid of it by deleting that permission set assignment or changing their profile, but no, they still have access because the other one grants them access.
That's right. What are your maybe experience or prediction for these trigger moments? It's Agentforce now, or this AI agents. There's a lot of talk about AI guardrails, understanding what maybe this digital labor force will do. And some big organizations are thinking about refactoring, but seeing refactoring of access as a big mountain of work. So what do you think are, some of the triggers that could be resulting into this refactoring, which of course, I agree with you, requires, I think, some kind of a trigger in order for organization to really get more secure and really invest into these technologies?
Any need to refactor the business processes at a large scale. So, for example, this could be that you're doing an internal refactoring in Salesforce where you're changing from one data model to another because you want to change something in the way you're doing your business. I've seen this actually be done several times already, where somebody has a Salesforce implementation and then they want to refactor that into a different, usually in the same org, a different data model because they want to change something about how they're running their business. And now we've gotten to that level where it's no longer new Salesforce implementations, but it's most of the organizations that I work with are looking to refactor their existing Salesforce. And when you have this kind of large need to refactor and change your data model, change your business process, that is an opportune moment to do it. that's the moment when you say, okay, we're getting rid of all of these objects. We're not going to need them anymore. We're going to use these other objects. And because this affects our permissions so much, right now is a good moment to change also to the permission set groups, because we need to think about our permissions anyway. We need to do the refactoring anyway. Mm-hmm. With a small effort, we can move everything from profiles to this other part. Now, usually I wouldn't see Agentforce or something like that being the trigger for this. Usually it would be like a business process change that actually requires us to change what is the data model in Salesforce.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on the Agentforce overall? I'm curious on you attended one of our events. Unfortunately, I wasn't there, but like I've seen some clips. You talked about AI, and curious on like within AI. Now we're seeing a lot of organizations and some really great, well-tuned demos from Salesforce. And I think with Valo, we're building a solution. We observe the configuration metadata. We look at the logs. We can then compare between humans, apps, and AI agents. We haven't really seen that many AI agents, AI solutions yet in customer productions. But I'm curious on if you have any advice for any of the audience listening around when it comes to security and AI. I think Salesforce has invested a lot of money building the Einstein trust layer, creating and bringing the LLM models into Salesforce, and there's now new log types. You can observe, what type of prompts users are doing. There are all kinds of test centers. There's new announcements almost like, every couple of months around making it easier to build AI agents. Does Salesforce, in your opinion, have the best toolkit? Are there some things that are needed, or what will be the one or two important things customers could maybe think about or prepare themselves for this agentic era?
The biggest thing I've seen when it comes to any AI project is it's not really, the hard part isn't getting the model to perform right. Mm-hmm. The hard part is in a way it is, but the hard part is getting the data in the right format for the model to use. Mm-hmm. And getting the data in the right format for the model to use, also, part of that is how do we make sure that we have the right security mechanisms implemented so that the AI agent that is querying around in our data is not retrieving data that it's not supposed to in that transaction. And this differs based on if we're dealing with a user who's using the agent who's authenticated versus an unauthenticated user. Because an authenticated user, we can trust that they are this particular user, therefore they should have access to this particular user's level of things. So a lot easier to do because then the chance that there are any sort of leaks is minimal if all the database queries, all that happen in the user context. Assuming we've set up all the permissions and everything correctly and haven't just granted big permissions and then reduced it just using the UI. UIs are not secure.
That's right.
Yeah. The other thing is if you have an unauthenticated user, so somebody's chatting with an agent, a customer's chatting with an agent on a web page, and that agent is unauthenticated. And then the question becomes, okay, to serve your customer in the right way, that agent probably needs to have access to some data. But how do you make sure that that customer who's interacting with that agent should have access to that data? And how do you do that without necessarily making the customer sign in because of user experience requirements? That's still a difficult thing to solve.
Right. Yeah. It's not an easy easy answer, like to be able then to the design looks straightforward, but I think there's quite a lot to think about, especially for existing orgs. Which takes me to a question: Do you think like organizations, in some situations, I remember working with Salesforce, there was kind of like a degree of complexity that some customers customized the application very heavily. They created everything custom, resulting into the situation like Salesforce new features or new technologies didn't quite fit, and they weren't compatible with the customers' customizations. And then sometimes some scenarios, customers like started with a new org, or there was a merger and acquisition, and someone decided that like, hey, we're going to go with this org because of the less tech debt, or less complex metadata. Do you think like the agent force or agents is an opportunity for customers to maybe somehow rethink their metadata or tech debt, or maybe start having new orgs? I think especially when we think about big organizations, many of them have many Salesforce orgs, maybe too many, and which is itself another kind of a problem. But do you think these new technologies that, when you're doing testing, that you want to kind of bring everything in Salesforce under one org, or AI is going to split and create more Salesforce orgs for customers?
The reason why you might want to have multiple orgs, this is a very key part on the CTA exam, the org strategy. So usually it's better to have a single org than multi-org. Mm-hmm. There are reasons to go multi-org, which you then have to think about and weigh the benefits of single versus multi. One of the reasons is data residency. Mm-hmm. If you have data residency requirements, you can't save the data in some geographic location, so they have to be saved in some. You can't get around that. Mm-hmm. You got to have multiple instances. Other one is if you have data volumes, so that putting all of it into a single org would cause performance issues. Mm-hmm. When it comes to like the data volumes and the queries. There really isn't a way to get around that unless if you absolutely need all that data for operational use. Mm-hmm. And finally, there's differing business requirements between the different orgs. Mm-hmm. That would be one of the last parts. No, not really. The last part is if you want to like maintain strategic autonomy, if you're looking to like spin off some department of the company, right, as a separate company, then you want to maintain this autonomy of the IT infrastructure so it doesn't cost a lot to do that spin-off. Mm-hmm. That would be another reason. I've seen that actually happen as well. Right. But then when it comes to like the agent force, and if this is an opportunity to refactor that metadata, it all depends on the use cases. Because if you have these kind of data residency requirements, then what you need is it adds a layer of complexity to it. Because if you have data residency requirements, then can you even bring all of that data into the same instance of Salesforce in the first place? Probably mm-hmm. not. Mm-hmm. But how do you architect then an agent that can get the customer data from the right place? Right. That depends on, do your customers access the agent from the same place mm-hmm. everywhere in the world? And if they do, then you might start checking their IP address for, okay, they're coming from here, so we're likely going to query from this system. That's right. Do things like that. And then it gets rather complicated because then you might need the same agent to be connected to multiple data sources, which gets difficult. Yeah. Exactly. And then, so now Salesforce also has the Data Cloud, which I think in some marketing terms is the golden ticket to a lot of the data volume related questions and kind of like a general aggregate. In a data residency environment, then I guess, are you in an environment where your American division needs its own Data Cloud and a European division needs its own, and or like have you bumped into first customers that have Data Cloud, and like what are your thoughts on Data Cloud overall, and now moving into the big data volume and bringing
marketing data and like, maybe shopping data, travel data, IoT data? Like, what are your thoughts on Data Cloud? And do you think it's really opening up the AI opportunity in for customers in Salesforce ecosystem?
The Data Cloud or the Data Cloud related things in Salesforce, I think to an extent, yes, it's dealing with some of these data volume related things. So if you have the need to process data, but no need to have it be in the operational database of Salesforce, where you're not interacting with it as part of a business process. Like, for example, you're not changing quotes. You can't really put the quotes in Data Cloud and still process them in Salesforce. That really it's a hacky way of doing it. You want to have them in the Salesforce database so that all of it can get processed in Salesforce. Otherwise, it gets really a complex game of ping pong.
Right.
So if you have to maintain data for reference or for calculating some customer metrics or something like that, then it does help with that. With the data residency requirements, if Data Cloud, if you can't have certain data about your customers outside of certain geographies, then that sort of dictates how you're going to set up your Data Cloud.
Yeah.
You're going to have multiple data clouds.
You're going to architect it.
Yeah. And then you're going to need to architect it that way. And then the question is, how do you connect your agent, if you're using Agentforce, to multiple data clouds? You will probably need to have some sort of ESB in the middle, like MuleSoft, that will actually then go and query the data. Because connecting to multiple data clouds, I don't actually know if it's possible, so I can't speak for anyway. But my gut feeling is you're going to have some sort of integration middleware that probably you connect to. That's sort of best way of doing it. Then when it comes to if it's an opportunity for organizations to use AI, I see in the long run, yes. But the way that I see is, even without the AI capabilities, Data Cloud is very much beneficial for a lot of organizations. I think when it comes to the maturity, most organizations are not yet at the level where they could start using AI really like comprehensively for a lot of things because of that data setup that we talked about earlier.
Right.
Because it's a data, every AI project is a data project. So you have to have the foundation of Data Cloud right, of how do we need to put the data into Data Cloud so that it serves our purposes for whatever business process you want to do, and so that it fits with how we will use AI with it.
Right.
And the usefulness of Data Cloud initially, I think, lies in calculating all kinds of metrics from your customers. Like the first project I did with Data Cloud was for a company that just wanted to know who we should be calling. And they had a lot of data in their Salesforce. And it was just Salesforce data that we used. But we basically calculated a metric of, all right, these people are, if you are this type of person, you get this many points. If you clicked on emails, you get this many points. If this, then you get more points. If this, then you get subtracted points.
You track behavior and...
So we calculate like a score.
Yeah.
And now sales reps, when they wanted to find out who they should be calling, they just create a report or a list view. And then they sort from highest score to lowest, and then they start dialing.
You help with the prioritization.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like, it would have been impossible. Well, not impossible. It would have been possible to do with just standard Salesforce. But because it's taking so much data from all places in the data model and putting that into an aggregate score, it's very hard to calculate. And Data Cloud is very good at that with the calculated insights from these all kinds of data that you have related to a customer and combining it in these kinds of abstract ways. Whereas, and just thinking about the like your processes in this way of like, all right, which customers should we be calling? Which customers
Right, a basic question.
Yeah, these are the basic questions. And you don't really need AI to start answering them. Just ask the salespeople, what kind of customers are your dream customers you want to be calling?
Yeah.
they will say this, that. And then you ask, okay, is this more important than that?
Yeah.
And then they will say, no, this is more important. And then you ask, all right, so this will be 100 points, this will be 50 points. And they're like, no, more like 170.
Yeah.
And then you start tuning that model. That's a lot easier to do than starting with a huge, like with the AI approach. And that already adds a lot of value potentially.
Yeah. Very great practical advice. And, great answer. Thank you. Hey, a couple of more topics I want to bring. And the first one would be around monitoring. So I built the product around the event monitoring and transaction security to help Salesforce ecosystem to observe what's going on in the ecosystem inside the entire Salesforce org, ingest the logs, look for additional details, whether you're debugging a technical issue or just understanding who's actually running reports and what's my performance with these. How important would you rate monitoring or observing Salesforce usage, or when you whether go into your workshop and you're kind of planning out things with customers and getting that source data, or then on a continuous basis, any advice for around some usefulness of knowing certain key metrics as the business evolves, how my Salesforce application usage across my users, across my managers, across my admins relate to my business results? Any thoughts
That's
on that?
a very interesting question. The fundamental is that the monitor, like traditionally also IT systems, while you're deciding of whether or not to start an IT initiative, that's a strategic decision where you think about, all right, what's the ROI? How much money is this going to bring? How much is that going to cost? But then usually after the investment decision is done, there's sort of no follow-up on, is the system actually helping us achieve our strategy? What you actually do is you have these kind of monitoring on the operational activity. Are people logging in? Are they entering data into the system? Are they using the system? That kind of metrics.
And maybe how are they interacting also? Like, like maybe they're on a mobile device, maybe they're on a desktop, they're on the road, and different. Are you designing for the right way to interact with
but you're not really, traditionally what is not measured is how does that impact the business overall?
Yep.
You measure, are people logging in, but you don't measure what's happening because people are logging in, or what's happening because they're using the system. There isn't a good way of measuring it.
So we can go deeper, not just observe that, like, people are logging in there, but we don't know anything after that. They come through the front door. What room of the house? Are they in the kitchen? Are they in the living room? Are they in the sauna? Like, where, what are they doing inside the house? Like,
Exactly. And it's very hard to connect, are they logging in or not, to, is this system helping us achieve our strategic objectives? Obviously, they have to be logging in, probably, to help achieve the strategic objectives. But that's not the key thing. The question is, as you said, what are they doing in the system, and monitoring that. So from like a measuring perspective of, did this initiative meet our strategic goals or help us meet our strategic goals? There you have to think about what we should be monitoring and what's the right thing to monitor. And are there even tools available to monitor it? Because interesting metrics that would be good to report on is our data more accurate than before? Are our forecasts better than before?
Right.
Are we meeting, if we try to solve a problem with this initiative or with some development that we did in Salesforce, did we observe any changes after we implemented it compared to before? So for example, if you want to improve forecast accuracy and you do some changes in Salesforce for people to enter in data, then you start measuring, okay, is our forecast accuracy actually more better? And are the people actually entering the data that they should be entering? That kind of monitoring you could do. If you're, let's say you have like an outbound call center and you implemented a change that it takes less time for them to go through a deal because in an outbound call center, every second matters.
Right.
then you start measuring of like, what's the throughput time of a user to click through all of it?
Yeah.
What was the impact?
Or when maybe a service desk agent is trying to close a case.
Yes.
How long are they on the looking at the portal?
Yes.
Are they maybe confused? They can't find the answer. Maybe you don't have knowledge articles or FAQs set up with the system, so they are kind of like spending a lot of time getting stuck, identifying then how long and which users are faster to the resolution. I think that's the power really of the monitoring, being able then to pinpoint specific maybe individuals in the organization that actually do perform better than maybe others, and what you can learn from them.
Absolutely. And the key part is like with the monitoring is the monitoring doesn't tell you what you should be looking at. That you have to sort of think about, all right, what is relevant for our business? And then you have to look at those metrics. And you also, like, if you start measuring users and you tell them that you're measuring them on this, you get what you measure.
Yeah, right.
You get what you measure. So there's a saying that there's only one time that you can measure some metric and get an actual true result of that metric. After you let everybody know that they're being measured on that, then they start catering the way they do things to that metric.
They change behavior.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, let's. It's still related to the monitoring, a feature in Valo, and maybe set some context around this. We're moving now from maybe monitoring to license and using talking about Salesforce cost. Salesforce is not the cheapest solution around. It is a big platform, been around for many years. Quite expensive, but offers great capabilities and great features. So Valo, while it's downloading the metadata, it's which includes license information, and then licenses are tied to permissions, and then also Valo downloads the logs. It gets understanding of what users have what license types,
and if they're using the features,
and are they actually using the features, and it can make recommendations that perhaps in this scenario these individuals actually are using only custom objects. Maybe they don't need a core license. They could only do with the platform license. They could be a license optimization. It's very hard to get the money back from Salesforce, but it gives an opportunity for the customer to pay for what they use, move towards consumption-based billing, and then maybe spend this money on Agentforce, on Slack or Tableau or
Data Cloud.
Or Data Cloud, yeah. So question on like planning Salesforce licenses. When you work with customers, you make recommendations of what type of licenses or overall configurations customers should do. I've observed that many customers have been doing these kinds of license checks, maybe once a year. Some more sophisticated customers do once a quarter. And with Valo, we want to give them this information on their fingertips whenever they need it. Any thoughts, comments around organizations to maybe think about that, like what type of licenses you have? Integration licenses, platform licenses, these login licenses, where now like how many times you actually use the app, and there's quite a lot. So any experiences or best practices that you have bumped into with Salesforce licenses?
Well, I'm not sure that there exists a person who understands the Salesforce licenses completely.
Yes, it's a quite big, broad area.
Exactly. So the question is what licenses you want to optimize again, like what licenses exist. And I'm sure that there are a lot of licenses that it's very hard to find a consolidated piece of information about what licenses exist, with also how many Salesforce products there are out there. And it's constantly also changing what features are part of what license and which ones are getting retired and which features are getting retired out of some license and that. And with the industry clouds especially, that adds a lot of complexity to it as well. So I see it as a very useful feature to be able to optimize the licenses. What I would urge anybody thinking about buying some license in Salesforce is to do an assessment of what functionality they want the user to be able to do, and how you plan to deliver that functionality. Do a bit of this architecture work up front of what are the key processes that you need to be doing to achieve your business objectives.
Yeah.
And what is the way in which you're going to be modeling those key processes in the system, and what features of the system you're going to be using for that. And also which of the users need access to those features. And sometimes if you have just one single feature that requires a bigger license for a certain user, you might want to think about your solution because of the cost of, all right, is there a way we can maybe get around this? Not saying that you need to like customize, build the same functionality in a custom way that would be circumventing the license agreement, but think about, is there a way in which we can somehow change the process so that we don't necessarily need to pay for the bigger license? And that gets into a question with the business usually.
Right.
This is also very much part of the Salesforce CTA exam, actually, is you have to recommend what licenses to give to every user, and you have to justify it.
Okay.
And even though you assume in the scenarios that you always have an infinite budget,
yes,
infinite budget doesn't mean you're going to spend money recklessly. It means you have to justify every single dollar or euro you spend, but you don't have a limit of how much you're going to use.
Right.
So you're not going to go and buy the most expensive license just because you can. You're going to buy the license where you can justify that we need the functionality when it comes to like Experience Cloud users, for example.
Yeah.
Or who should have access to some Revenue Cloud features or things like that.
Right. Yeah. So that's a combination of conversations, workshops, monitoring logs, collecting information. So quite a lot of work.
And to be honest, I think if you're like a consultant working with Salesforce on some deal, a lot of the time, especially with the smaller customers, the Salesforce account executives don't know the licensing model themselves of some of the products. And
I've seen that.
You as a Salesforce consultant probably have a very good idea of what licenses are available, et cetera. And I've gotten into the position where their account executive has we've been engaged only after the deal has been closed.
Yeah.
And I've seen that the customer has bought something that they totally don't need on a few occasions. So it's better to get, also from like a customer satisfaction point of view, it's better to get in as a partner earlier on into the deal.
Right.
You can help the account executive close it as well. They very much, if you're saying, hey, I think in this case, you could sell this license to them, they will appreciate that help.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, wonderful. It's been great to have this conversation with you. The time is running. Before we turned on the camera, we were talking about. I think we both have a interesting connection to Arizona, if I remember right. My daughter is starting there in the college in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to be traveling to Tucson, some place I heard you actually lived in Arizona. So I'd be curious to hear from you. I guess you have lived both in Europe and US, and any particular advice for myself and my daughter as we're going to Arizona, I guess, which could be monsoon rain season or. Overall, I hear it's a very hot place, so it'll be my first time in Tucson. I've been to Phoenix once time, and probably the hottest place in the US I've ever been.
Yeah, well, I think Phoenix might be slightly hotter.
Okay.
I think just due to the elevation, but Tucson is still doesn't mean it's cold. So Tucson, places to see there, things I would recommend doing. So depends when you go there, obviously. One thing that we really did quite often is we drove up to Mount Lemmon in Tucson, which is like it's an almost 3,000 meter mountain. It might be a bit above that.
Yeah.
And there's actually a ski resort on top of the mountain as well.
All right.
Yeah, a ski resort that's probably the size or bigger than like Ruka here in Finland.
Yeah.
And it's open for like 2 to 8 weeks throughout the year. But yeah, it was very interesting skiing there in like in like February because like I was just wearing snow pants and then a t-shirt because it was so hot that you can't really like wear a winter coat. And then when you fall over into the snow, then it's super cold.
You gotta be careful not to get scraped.
Yes, absolutely.
And wear a lot of sunscreen.
Yeah. And then there's the Desert Museum also in Tucson, where you can find all kinds of desert wildlife being showcased and all that. So there's a good bunch of places to see in Tucson.
Wow.
And if you're into like aerospace things, there's the Pima County Air and Space Museum also, which when we lived there 15 years ago, no, more than 15 years ago, they marketed it as the third largest air and space museum in the US.
All right. Well, I sure know where to go or who to send messages if I have more questions around Arizona and Tucson. You had a nice summer this summer. Like I've been in Finland now past couple of weeks, and it's almost felt like Arizona. You know, it's
bit too humid. Bit too humid.
More humid, maybe. Yeah. Yeah. So like you had a nice summer. Like just maybe concluding with the question. Like I think Dreamforce is in October, coming up in a couple of months. Anything you're waiting from the fall Dreamforce announcements? Anything you're excited about to conclude this 2025?
To conclude the 2025?
Yeah, I mean, like towards the end of the year, like what do you have a customer project or something that you're excited? Some new announcements or some things that you're working on towards the end of this year.
We're working on
or some new certification, perhaps. Or
let's see. We're working on getting a community event, Salesforce community event for the next summer here into Helsinki.
Oh, great!
Actually, two. So we're working on that.
Oh, that's exciting. Is this like a targeted particularly for architects or like?
We've gotten together with some people, and we decided that we want to have Architect Dreaming in Helsinki next year. It started out in Paris, then it went to Prague, then it went to Berlin. This year it was in London, and next year I'm like, let's do it in Helsinki.
That sounds fantastic, exciting. So there you go, everybody. Every architect in the community, mark your calendars and let's start planning for Helsinki events. And we are going to, if it's okay, mark our LinkedIn information below in the video. So if you have any questions on anything we talked about, Hermanni, I guess everybody can contact you and on LinkedIn and send their questions. Also, feel free to reach out and connect with us on LinkedIn. And thank you again for so much for the conversation. It was wonderful to have you.